topics and opinions expressed on the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4WN Radio.
This is Beyond Confidence with your host, Divya Parekh. Do you want to live a more fulfilling life? Do you want to live your legacy and achieve your personal, professional, and financial goals? Well, coming up on Divya Parekh's Beyond Confidence, you will hear real stories of leaders, entrepreneurs, and achievers who have stepped into discomfort, shattered their status quo, and are living the life they want. You will learn how relationships are the key to achieving your aspirations and financial goals. Moving your career or business forward does not have to happen at the expense of your personal or family life, or vice versa. Learn more at www.divyaparekh.com, and you can connect with Divya at contact@divyaparekh.com. This is Beyond Confidence, and now here's your host, Divya Parekh.
Good morning, listeners. So thrilled to be with you. Super excited. For those of you who don't know me, just a little bit about me. I help people build confident narratives, whether you're in entrepreneurial world or in the corporate world, and then develop that presence, which is, let's say, if you're in the corporate world, we develop your executive presence, take your accomplishments, and create a narrative that you're proud to have it, and build a brand that makes people see you as the trusted leader in your expertise. And if you're an entrepreneur, we build that confident narrative in a way, along with social media proof and authority assets, so that you're recognized as a trusted leader in your industry as well. So that's a bit about me. And folks, I would like to share that I'm so thankful to each and every one of you who have got the copy of my books, both Expert to Influencer and the Entrepreneur's Garden, amongst many others, because the partial profits from our book sales go to kiva.org. And because of you, we have been able to help so many entrepreneurs all across the globe. And I invite you and highly encourage you to spend 1 hour of your time every month to help somebody out. Well, let's invite our guest today, Debbie Peterson. Welcome, Debbie.
Well, thank you.
So we usually start out with journey from your childhood. Do you recall any moment that stands out for you even today?
Yes. Yeah. Right off the top of my head, when I was 5 years old, we had an election in my kindergarten class. And our teacher asked us who we were going to elect, who we were going to vote for. And I voted for John Kennedy. And I went home that night. My dad was tucking me into bed. And I told him about it because it was exciting to me. And he asked me who I voted for. I told him. And then he asked me why I voted for that person. And I said, because everybody else did. And he said, honey, you never, ever vote for someone, or you never do anything because everyone else does. You do what you think is right. And that stayed with me. And I don't know if I thought it was right or wrong. I was 5 years old, but voting for someone because they were the right person, not because everyone else did, really hung with me.
Oh, I can imagine for a 5-year-old, and that's such a tender age anyway. So as you grew up, and I know listeners, will be sharing about Debbie's political career as well. So as you grew up, were you fascinated by, I know you were so young at 5, but as you grew up, what were your interests?
Well, I didn't like dolls at all. And my mother said what most fascinated me as a Christmas present was a shoebox full of business supplies. She gave me a stapler and some scissors and some paper and some thumbtacks and, all the things that you need to make an office work. And apparently that's what I liked best. And I liked the dolls where you could pull the hair out of their head and throw it. So I liked practical things, but otherwise dolls bored me. So I seemed to always be someone who wanted to do things that were practical.
And that's okay,
Yeah.
So many times what happens is that there is this stereotyping that girls like dolls and boys like playing rough. So there is nothing that defines that. Different kids, it's personality, it's human beings. Boys can like different things, girls can like different things, and it's completely okay. Because I do recall that I had a couple of dolls and they would just sit there and I wouldn't be playing with them. Like, okay. When my friends come over, they definitely seem to have a lot of fun with them. So go for it. That's it. It's a good plaything. I mean, I used to carry books around when I was young, even though they would be all tattered, I'd still have it because I had few favorites that I stuck around with. So totally
Mm.
get what you're sharing. So as you grew up, we know now that you used to like all the office supplies. Where did your life take you?
What I liked most of all was writing in high school, and I wanted to be a writer. And as I went through college, I realized that I was good at communication. So I did a communication degree. I also really liked science, though. So as I was about ready to graduate, my advisor in college said to me, you really should get a bachelor's of science instead of a bachelor of arts because you took enough science courses. So why don't you do a communications degree, but let's give you a bachelor's of science. So I have a BSc in public relations. So I like to say to people, I have a BS in PR. That usually raises a few laughs. But I started in journalism, and I was afraid. I was afraid to stay in journalism because I wasn't sure that I could produce all the time. And it's interesting to me now looking back, because when I was in high school, I won journalism awards. I was a co-editor of my high school newspaper with another gal, and we won the statewide journalism award. And we had to write immediately. We would go to these competitions and we'd have to write something, and we won. We were number one. So I don't know why I was afraid of producing all the time, but I was. And so I said, at that time, they said, well, go into radio TV because there aren't many women now. Go into radio TV. But I hated that because that was the time where you had to, like we do now with podcasts, and I finally figured it out, stick all kinds of jacks into different sockets and things. And I really wasn't interested in the technical side. So I finally gravitated to public relations. But of course, then I'd had a year of journalism, a year of radio TV, and that was very, very helpful in the long term. So I graduated with a BS in PR and lots of experience in radio, TV, and journalism as well.
Fantastic. So out of three things, I mean, they're all interconnected and all
Hmm.
essential. That said, you talked about radio, TV, journalism. Which one was your favorite and why?
Honestly, journalism. I really enjoyed writing. I had a wonderful journalism professor. She was a writer. She was the daughter of a local politician, and she just had a heart of gold. And as she was a prominent member in the church I went to, and the church was so supportive. And in fact, I did exchanges during the summers and holidays with the Church of Scotland, and did a lot of volunteering in Scotland as a high school and college student. And there were a lot of Scottish kids that would come over and volunteer in my church in the summer. So um, she was highly influential, and I really enjoyed the journalism side of it.
Oh, fantastic. And I can definitely see your passion. It definitely comes through. As you moved forward in your life, you talked about being, in public relations. So how long did that last and where did you go from there?
Once I got out of college, I helped my mother launch her own business. And she had started out as a teacher. She hated teaching. So she retrained while we were young and got a degree in accounting, became an auditor, became a county auditor, hit a glass ceiling, decided that she would become an entrepreneur. So when she was about 40, she started her own business baking her mother's recipes for brownies and cookies. And that was the era when it was kind of a Jungian thing. There was sort of this collective subconscious, and all across the country, women started baking baking cookies and brownies and making businesses out of it. Mrs. Fields and loads of others. Famous Amos. It wasn't just women. Famous Amos wasn't a woman, and my mother did that too. And my brother did the deliveries. My stepfather was in charge of the sales. I did the launch, hired and fired people, and baked a lot of chocolate chip cookies along the way. And helped her launch it, got it on the radio, got a huge spread in the local newspaper. And after about a year there, I decided that I wanted to work abroad. And of course, with a degree in communication, it had to be somewhere where they more or less spoke English. So I went to Scotland, and I worked in advertising and marketing there for a couple of years. And I came to the same realization that my mother had come to, and I had been doing taste testing on foods and working with food product development and launch. And I realized that my mother's products would work really well in Britain, and that as a woman, especially in Scotland in the 80s, there was simply no way that even if I got an MBA, that I was going to go very far in the corporate world. And if I really wanted to succeed, and if I wanted to provide a contribution to this country that had allowed me to come in and work there, the best thing I could do was create jobs. And I was young enough not to think about what that really, how hard that was going to be. I just thought of it as a game that I could play, and I knew I could play that game. So I took on a course. I took a course at Glasgow University, the Scottish Business School, and learned about spreadsheets and balance sheets. And at that time, we had calculators. That's as good as it went. At least we didn't have to use our fingers or, paper and pen. At least we had calculators. So we had to create spreadsheets. We had to create a business plan, but we had the expertise of, the Scottish Business School, of the top experts, the top business experts in the country. And so I created a business plan. I raised £6,000. I bought a small van and a really large oven. I started, I taste tested the products in my own home. They were very, very popular. And I created a business that took me to 100 employees and turnover of $6 million in the first few years. And lots of subsidiaries, a trucking company, an office in London. And I don't know if I said 100 employees. And it was a blast. I had so much fun. I was made an honorary Scottish, Scottish master baker. And that's another one of those words you have to say carefully. And the Young Career Woman of Scotland. I was given an Enterprise Award by Margaret Thatcher. And all of that really because nobody told me I couldn't do it. So I did.
Well, congratulations. And here's where a lot of our listeners, as they're listening, will have questions. What was it that made you determine, like, okay, corporate is not cut out for me? One question.
Say that again. What was the question?
Corporate is not for me. I'm not cut out for it.
Well, it wasn't corporate. My motivation really was that I wanted to have a career. I knew that I wasn't going to be able to have a career in the traditional way in corporate. And I knew what I was doing because I had done it with my mother. So I had a role model. I had a formula. I had a product. I tested the product, and I wanted to give back. I wanted to give back to the community that had had welcomed me with open arms. And in Scotland at that time, the shipyards had closed in Glasgow, and the unemployment rate was 33% in the shipyards. And I thought, what would be the best thing I could do for the community that has been so good to me? And I realized that would be to create jobs. And so my motivation really wasn't the corporate world. My motivation was, how can I give back? And I did. And that is why I was allowed to stay. I wouldn't have been allowed to stay really had I not been creating jobs. So, but I also recognized that I was 24 years old. I was a young woman in a foreign country, and there was a lot I didn't know about business. And I'm so glad that I got my business education in Great Britain, because there's a really different historical business tradition in Britain. Many of the businesses that came up there were not the top echelon of the country as they are in the United States. They were maybe the second tier at best, probably the third tier, but they were often almost religious refugees. They were Jewish, they were Baptists, they were all kinds of different people coming in who had really high value systems. And so they created businesses where they had a concept of giving back, and they had a concept of stakeholders, and they had a concept of being good to their employees and good to their stakeholders. And so it validated my values. And so I learned a set of values and a way of doing business that I've carried with me, and that is emulated in the United States with some of the really big companies, and I'm sure some of the small companies too. But the big companies can afford to emulate it. Sometimes in a small company you can't. And but I think that really helped with my success. And I hired kids who were 15 and taught them. I had to teach the ones who had been already training as bakers. I had to teach them to bake American style, because it's very different. And but I also taught them to read a spreadsheet, and I taught them how what they did influenced the profit and loss of the company. And so I trained them so that they could move up in the company.
So that's a very powerful story. Now, you have already shared a few factors that contributed to your success. Looking back at the whole venture, you are just 24 years old, and that's still very young. You're in a new country, you're creating a business plan. One thing that definitely stands out is that you did have a business model that had already worked back home. Even with all that, your intentions were powerful. What would you say were other contributing factors to your success, where you were able to hire 100 employees?
Um, well, one of the things was high unemployment. So I was able to find great kids who maybe didn't have confidence that they could do well in school, but they could grasp the concepts of business. They were streetwise, and that was a good thing for business. And people like Richard Branson, I don't know that he graduated from high school either. So it's not necessarily a qualification to be good at your job that you have even a high school diploma. There are lots of people who have a lot of ability that actually takes them away from school. Sometimes they make decisions to get out of school, sometimes because they do have ability, and that I recognized that. But the other thing I realized, as I said before, is that I was young and there was a lot I didn't know. And so I decided I needed to form a corporation. The company was getting big enough. And so I realized I needed a board, and that board could act as advisors. And so I decided to figure out who I needed on that board. And what I discovered is that the most important thing on a board, doesn't matter whether it's a business board, a nonprofit board, a government board, any board, if this is across the board for all boards, is diversity. And it's not just gender diversity. It's not just sex diversity, race diversity. It's a diversity of opinion. And if you have a gender diversity, if you have all the other diversities, you will get the diversity of opinion. But it's a diversity that does represent your customers. It's a diversity that represents the people that you are doing business with. And And it's a diversity of opinion that is most critical, because when you have that diversity of opinion, you come out with a better product because you're getting more input and better input. It's probably your first marketing exercise is to have a board with diversity of opinion. And so you want to have a board with experts on it, and you want to have a board with someone who's either an attorney or an accountant who's willing to work with you and provide their expertise on what you're doing on the board. You want to have someone who's a like-minded entrepreneur. So at least there's someone there who gets it as far as being an entrepreneur. In my case, I chose my mother, and I chose also someone who was very good at marketing. Someone on my advertising agency. I chose the director there. I chose my accountant. I chose my attorney, and I chose. You also want to have a customer, so I chose one of my small customers, but he was also had a degree in pharmacy and owned a health food store, so he could help me with when I developed healthy products for that side of the market. And I also chose the buyer for a supermarket. She was a woman, and she had a great handle on what works in supermarkets. So I had a really wide variety of people on my board, but they were all experts, and they could all bring a different approach to what I was doing in my company. And I'll never forget that one of the most interesting things that happened to me was that my cake buyer from a large supermarket chain in the UK wanted to bring her boss with her. And they came to my company, they toured the company, they tasted the products. And then he said, I want to teach you something that I teach the students when I teach at an MBA course in London. And you know what he wanted to teach me? He wanted to teach me to meditate. And I had meditated some in the past. I'd learned to in college. So for 20 minutes, we meditated. And that is the kind of holistic approach that bringing on a board like that contributes to your company. It was a great experience. It was a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Mindfulness is the answer to everything, because I've been a mindfulness practitioner for most of my life, and it's a work in progress. You never get there. There is nothing to get there. It's just being in the moment, and that's such a huge help. So you talked about board of directors, fascinating story. Now there may be folks who are just getting started, and then all these questions are coming in their mind. So like, there were a few things that you said are a must. So like, one having an attorney, one having an accountant, one having a fellow entrepreneur, one having a customer. And then I'm assuming having other folks who are related to your business. So now a couple of questions come in. One, where could people find these experts? And second, do they need to get paid?
In my case, I paid them a nominal amount. I think I gave them £300 a month, which I guess, that would have been about $450 a month, which I'm sure was not really that much. It's a lot when you're starting out. By that time I was making money, and so I could afford to do that. But they probably could have earned more somewhere else, but they wanted to do it. They were having fun with it. It was a novel experience for them to work with a young American. And I played that. So you play your assets. If you're a young blonde, I'm not saying flirt and sleep your way up the line. I'm absolutely not saying that. But you do, you work with what you've got. And if you've got that, and people appreciate it, use it, work it.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it was fun, and I appreciated them too, because they were novelty to me. And so I found a lot of them from the course I was on. And it really comes from networking, honestly. So if you don't I highly recommend getting educated. I highly recommend going on a course. Go to some of these places where they teach you to start a business. It took me it probably gave me a 10-year head start on where I would have been otherwise. And in fact, I would say if you're not willing to do that, you shouldn't start a business. Because if you don't know where your business is financially, you will fail. Most businesses, I think only about 10% survive. And so if you don't want to be in the 90%, you really, really need to learn how to read a profit and loss, and learn how to understand a balance sheet, learn how to understand if you actually have your head above water. And
Mhm.
most businesses in the first year lose money. In the second year, this is businesses that survive. The first year they lose money. The second year they break even, and then the third year they make a little bit of money. And then after that, they should make money every year. And you need to know what that looks like. How do you know when you're actually making money?
Absolutely. And here's the thing, folks, you don't need to have a board of directors from the word get go. For
Mm-mm.
example, when you start out, you can just even have an accountant. It's important because they can guide you what are the states and laws and regulations, and especially depending on the type of business you have, you don't want to be not in compliance with different laws. And sometimes it may happen that you don't even know about it. So that's where, like, having an accountant and then having an attorney, or joining a firm, something like, Legal Shield or Legal Zoom, I think so there,
Mhm.
or there are Rocket Lawyers, like that, different
Yeah.
things that you can join, which will give you the benefit of having somebody at your side and at least get some opinion. So these two are important. And then even having a bookkeeping system, because it's super, super important, as you were mentioning, Debbie, is about knowing your balance sheet and spreadsheet and taking that initial course. And now, in terms of other people, you could barter. For example, if they're fellow entrepreneurs, fellow customers, like seeing what you can do for them and what they can do for you. So this way, you're not being stressed out. That where am I going to bring the cash flow? Where am I going to invest in these people right now? And as you mentioned, something about that, as you're going during the course or as you're networking, see who's passionate about helping. So, for example, I am associated with another association where I give away certain hours every month for mom entrepreneurs.
Mhm.
So, look for associations where you could benefit from the different resources that are available. So, the key is that knowing that if you're starting a business, you got to play smart and also do some hustle and grind. So, great thoughts over there, Debbie. And as you continued your life journey, I know you were in, you shared that you had your own board of directors and you learned that. And then you went to being a mayor in a small town in California. Tell us your journey over there.
Well, when I was 40, I had my son, and his dad and I decided that we wanted to return to California because we knew he would be an only child, and we
Mhm.
wanted to raise him near family. And we also were more comfortable with schooling in California. And my mother lived in a small town. She kept telling us it was paradise, and it was paradise, and we just loved it. And so we moved back to California, and it was a business decision too, and it was also a weather decision because we just got tired of the constant rain, and and um, and the taxes were getting really, really high, and they really almost taxed us out of business. In I at that point was doing business consulting. I had sold my business to a management buyout,
Mhm.
and we had a couple of retail shops, and the taxes, we just got taxed out of business basically. So we moved.
So now
Yeah.
let's see, like, I think so we may have missed a piece here. So, like, from Scotland, when did you come back to California? I mean, to US.
So we were in Scotland, and
Mhm.
I had my ex-husband was running a couple of retail businesses on the high street in Glasgow, and the property taxes just got higher and higher and higher,
Got it.
and it just became untenable to continue.
Mm.
with that. So that, along with the weather, along with the whole schooling
Mm-hmm.
system, and along with the fact that we had a boy who would be an only child, we just decided we would return
Got
to
it.
California. So after 20 years in the UK, I came back to this small town. And it was a small town that was a lovely place in a kind of isolated county right in the middle of California on the beach. And we knew, I knew after a point when neighbors would ask me if I would please run for the city council, I knew that it needed some help with public relations, and its budget was about the same as the turnover of the company I had run, and its number of employees and various places they operated from throughout the city. It's about the same size as the businesses I had run. And I thought, I could really get my arms around this and I could really help. And they needed help with redevelopment and business creation. And I thought, I could do this. I could really help here. But my son was young. And so I started and did 4 years as a planning commissioner, and then spent 4 years as a city council member and became the mayor for 2 years, went back to the city council for 3 years, ran for supervisor, and then finally and had decided at the end of about 10 years I would probably go back to writing, and my son by then would be in college and I could focus on writing.
Mm-hmm.
But it didn't go the way I expected it to go. At all.
it,
It didn't work according
it
to my
seldom
plan.
does in life.
What was that?
I'm saying it seldom does in life.
No, it doesn't. It usually doesn't. And it's always interesting, but it's not always the way you expect it to be. And so when I was on the city council, in city councils, you sit on numerous committees that decide what to do with the taxpayers' money, with the money that we all give to government to serve us. And I noticed that on the boards that people didn't understand their roles and responsibilities. They didn't understand their fiscal responsibilities or their duties. They didn't ride herd on the chief executive. They just did whatever the chief executive said to do, and they never asked any questions. And they didn't seem to understand the numbers or the budgets, and it just didn't seem right to me. And I knew that they were really just wide open for corruption. And that was
Mm.
about at least a quarter of them. And on one of the boards, there were three other women who'd been CEOs, and we got together and we turned it around. We whipped it into shape, and but on another one, they were bankrupt, and they managed to join up with another organization, and that got sorted out. But there were on 2 or 3, I managed to bring in a national investigator, a national government corruption investigator who did audits, and people ended up going to jail or being charged and having to pay back a lot of money to agencies. So I ended up really not doing what I had done on the planning commission, which was basically run a government agency or oversee a government board where people were respectful of one another, and we found win-win solutions, and we mitigated issues, and people spoke together and understood what was going on, and it worked as a committee of many people, with the community as it should, as it was meant to. And it was a very positive experience for 4 years. Being on the council and being mayor wasn't like that at all. I found so much corruption, and so many people came to me
Mm.
that it was that I had to beat the corruption before I could actually really make any headway, because it was not a win-win scenario. It was a
Mm.
win-lose. We win, you lose.
Right. So, as our listeners and audiences viewing, they're probably thinking, elections are coming up, and of course, everybody knows that there is some form of corruption somewhere, or possibility of it. How can uh, the general public keep their officials accountable?
The biggest thing is to show up. And we all think we vote, and that's a wonderful thing, and it's important. but it's not enough. And our government, especially local government, is not set up with the accountability that we think it is. In the United States, we're all taught that that we have three branches of government and they all hold one another accountable. And that's true at the national level. It's even more so at the state level. But once you get down to the local level, basically you have a city council that chooses the city manager, the executive level, and a city manager chooses the police department, and the justice department is sort of over in left field and really doesn't pay too much attention. And so you really only have one department, that's the legislative, and they control everything. And the people who are supposed to be holding them accountable are us. And so you have to go to the meetings, you have to watch the agendas. And if you have good government, they can't govern if you don't go and tell them what you want, because their job is to represent us. But how can you represent someone who never speaks to you, or who never tells you how they wish to be represented, or who never says, we give you all these tax dollars and here's how we'd like you to spend them? And so the most important thing is to show up. And it's easy to show up. There are council meetings, they're advertised, they're online, the budgets, everything's online. You can find it all. So if you have good government, you need to show up to help them govern you well, because it is your government. It belongs to you. It's your institution. They're there to serve you. And if you have bad government, when you show up, they're less likely to misperform. And you are more likely to figure out that they are and be able to stop it.
Wow. Yeah. So the responsibility doesn't stop with voting.
No, and it doesn't stop with marching. It doesn't stop with campaigning for your favorite candidate. You have to show up.
You gotta show up. So I gotta share that just something small. So in our neighborhood, our neighborhood is like surrounded by, it used to be surrounded by a lot of woods and all that. So like one became a major road. And then on the other side, the entrance to our neighborhood hits against a piece of land that's completely wooded. And then what happened was, you're talking about showing up, is that they wanted to bring a lot of commercial, I'm not sure, retail there or some other stuff. And like a lot of different developers, land developers showed up, and then they wanted to participate. And I don't know, I don't remember exactly the details, what the plans were, but the main result or outcome would have been that we would have had tremendous traffic. And when you have traffic, a lot of kids would walk down to the pool that bordered next to this piece of parcel. So we had few folks who were really, really strong, and they were part of the homeowners association. And anytime this legislation went through the city council, they'd show up and they would send everybody emails.
Yeah.
And saying that, show up, and we would go and show up. So I definitely see what you're talking about.
That's how it's done.
Showing up does make a difference. I mean, that's my little piece of experience. I don't have much of the other experiences and all that, but that made a difference. And to this day, we have not had anybody come and build anything on that piece of land. I mean, we're still enjoying the woods.
Oh, congratulations. And the thing about it is that we all have a part to play. And sometimes it's just sitting in the audience. And sometimes that's all you can do, because we can't all show up all the time. And we can't all be the mayor. We can't all be the council member. We can't all be the ones who lead it. But some of us can send emails. Some of us speak well. And so it takes all of us. And I always say it takes a village to raise a city. So we all have a part to play. So showing up doesn't mean you have to always be the front man. It just means you have to show up in whatever way your gift is to show up.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And what's amazing is that we never said that we don't want any development there. So for example, they had talked about moving a library. That would have been phenomenal for us and for our kids. So it's about that partnership. It's not that, you want to stop the development, because if you stop the development, that also hurts the city
Mm.
and folks and jobs and all that. But it's about that partnering together and coming out with solutions that are viable for both the parties. So now that
Yes.
said, um, do share with us. Do you have any political aspirations still, or you're done? And where are you right now?
Honestly, I'm burned out. I am completely
Mm,
burned out. It was such a hard fight. And in the end, um, th- uh, our council brought cannabis to town, and we had lots of local applicants for dispensaries with clean backgrounds. The council only chose those with felonies in their backgrounds. And once they opened dispensaries, 2 out of 3 had further felonies at the dispensaries, involving the dispensaries. And it became so corrupt that I couldn't even continue to participate, because there was nothing I could vote on that even had, that was clean. And
mm,
so I resigned,
mm.
and I started to write. And that wasn't the book I planned to write, but it was the book I ended up writing. So no, I didn't stay. And the only way I could, at in the end, I was so outnumbered that all I
Mm,
could do was write the story.
mm.
So that was the part I had to play. That was my role at that point, and at this point.
Well, you're educating people, and I'm sure we, as you increase awareness and raise awareness for these kind of things, it does make a difference. So, for example, I participated. I went a few times. It's not like I've been super active or anything like that. And that tells me that even that small of a part that you play is very super important. And then I worked with a lot of young kids where I've
Mm.
pushed them through to become leaders. And so we can each bring our strengths and play to it. That's the key. So tell us more about your book, and where can people find it? What is it about? And how can they connect with you?
Well, it's called The Happiest Corruption: Sleaze, Lies, and Suicide in a California Beach Town. All of that happened. And I called it that. I went for that angle because I know that people look for the sensational. And once I've got their attention, then I can explain to them why it's so critically important. It's because all of those things happen when you don't pay attention. And so along with that, I am happy to speak, consult, work with folks like you all had to, sort out an issue in your own town. And also, I have a course called Double Dias Adventures in Local Government. And it's for new council members, and also for people who want to learn how to effectively operate in local government, and for citizens, because it took me 6 years to figure it all out, because there's no playbook. No one tells you how. So all of those you can find link to from my website, which is simple. It's debbiepeterson.com. It's just my name, DebbiePeterson.com.
Hmm. Thank you for being so open, Debbie, and sharing your heart out. So, is there any last thought or two that you'd like to leave our listeners and audience with?
Yeah, we are a government of the people, by the people, for the people. We are the people. It belongs to us. And like anything else, if we don't pay attention, it falls down, it falls apart. So it's up to us to play that part.
Mm.
And thank you. Thank you so much for what you do, and for giving me a voice for all of us.
Oh, absolutely. It's my pleasure to do that, because when we all come together, one of my favorite quotes, probably,
Mm.
if you've known me, you've heard me say that one too many times, and it never gets old for me, that individually we are a drop of water, together we are an ocean.
Absolutely. That's right. That's how it works. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Debbie. And thank you, listeners, for joining us, because without you, the show would not be possible. Reach out to us and let us know, how can we support you and serve you. What is it that you need from us? We'll bring those experts, those stories, so that you can live the life you deserve. And thank you, Juan, for making the show technically possible. Until next time, be well and take care.
Thank you for being part of Beyond Confidence with your host, Divya Parekh. We hope you have learned more about how to start living the life you want. Each week on Beyond Confidence, you hear stories of real people who have experienced growth by overcoming their fears and building meaningful relationships. During Beyond Confidence, Divya Parekh shares what happened to her when she stepped out of her comfort zone to work directly with people across the globe. She not only coaches people how to form heart connections, but also transform relationships to mutually beneficial partnerships as they strive to live the life they want. If you are ready to live the life you want and leverage your strengths, learn more at www.divyaparekh.com. And you can connect with Divya at contact@divyaparekh.com. We look forward to you joining us next week.